The next day for me was Sunday. It was late afternoon and Uncle Monty was visiting. Alvin was there too, and from what I could overhear from my bed of what was being said in the kitchen, he hadn't been seen anywhere around since Mr. Wishnow had committed suicide on Friday and he'd walked away from that crap game with his bundle of fives, tens, and twenties. But since dinner time Friday, I'd been away myself, off with the horses and their hooves, enveloped by kaleidoscopic hallucinations of the orphanage workhouses pursuing me to the edge of the earth. And now Uncle Monty, again, Uncle Monty attacking Alvin, and with words I could not believe were being spoken in our house in the presence of my mother. But then Uncle Monty knew how to subdue Alvin in ways that my father just couldn't employ. By nightfall, after all the shouting had subsided into lamentations, for my late Uncle Jack and Monty's booming voice had gone hoarse, Alvin accepted the job at the produce market that he'd refused to consider when Monty had offered it first. As unmanned as he'd been by his mutilation on the morning he arrived at Penn Station, in the care of the hulking Canadian nurse, as overridden by defeat as when, from his wheelchair, he wouldn't dare look a one of us in the eye, Alvin consented to dissolve his partnership with Shushy and to give up gambling on the neighborhood streets. A hater no less of subservience than of weeping, he astonished everyone by breaking into guilty tears and begging forgiveness and agreeing to stop being a brute to my brother, an ingrate to my mother and father, and a bad influence on me, and to treat us with the appreciation we were due. Uncle Monty warned Alvin that if he didn't abide by his promises and continued instead to sabotage Herman's household, the Roths would be finished with him for good. Though Alvin appeared to be trying hard to make a go of the menial donkey work that was his first job, he didn't last long enough at the market to rise even a notch above sweeping and fetching. One day, when he'd been there a little more than a week, the FBI came around to inquire about him, the same agent using the same menacingly innocuous questions he'd asked my family and me, only insinuating now to the other produce workers that Alvin was a self-declared traitor, plotting with anti-American malcontents like himself to assassinate President Lindbergh. The charges were ludicrous, and yet, tame as Alvin had been all that week, tame as he'd sworn and dedicated himself to remaining, he was fired on the spot, and, on the way out, instructed by one of the goons in charge never to come anywhere near the market again. When my father got on the phone to his brother, demanding to know what had happened, Monty replied that he'd had no choice. He'd been ordered to get rid of his nephew by Longy's boys. Newark's Longy's Willman, who'd grown up like my father and his brothers, a son of immigrants in the old Jewish slums, ran the Jersey rackets back then, the ruthless potentate of everything from bookmaking and strike-breaking to the trucking and hauling services foisted on merchants like Belmont Roth. Because the feds were the last people Longy needed snooping around, Alvin lost a job, cleared out of our house, and left the city in under 24 hours. This time, not across the international border for Montreal and the Canadian Commandos, but just over the Delaware for Philadelphia and a job with Shushy's uncles, the gambling machine king. A racketeer seemingly more tolerant of traitors than his peerless counterpart up in New Jersey. And that is where we will pause.